I will hand over to Colin Mitchell. Just a little bit of an introduction for Colin. He has been involved in anti-nuclear human rights and environmental activism over his life, with a constant concern over the threat of nuclear war. A formative experience was living through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Over the last few years, he joined the Labor Party to help with the process of lobbying Labor to write the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons onto its platform. This was done on the eve of Labor being elected to government. However, since that time, Colin has become aware of the worldwide movement to have nuclear-armed nations adopt a no-first-use policies for their nuclear weapons, China already having such a policy. With nuclear war becoming more and more likely, he regards this as an essential guardrail to put in place. With the introduction of AUKUS, he joined Labor against war. And Colin is concerned that the Australian Labor government is taking no steps to prevent nuclear war, instead the reverse. Australia supporting the idea of a no first use policies would be an easy step that could be taken immediately and would have a big political impact. So thank you, Colin. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Annette. Just to put it in context, you've heard some of that context already from Annette. The doomsday clock is very close to midnight now, and the risk of nuclear war is quite great, in spite of the fact that there's mass apathy amongst the public and amongst politicians about nuclear war. That's gradually changing. And in the context of a looming war, possible war between the US and China, and maybe involving Russia as well, that risk of nuclear war is very great. And people like Hugh White are telling us that the risk of a conventional war between the US and China becoming a nuclear war is actually, he thinks it's quite likely. So that's not a good situation. Unfortunately, that scenario is likely to transpire well before general nuclear disarmament occurs, whether under the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or by some other route. We are likely to have a nuclear war well before then. So therefore, taking steps towards the prevention of a nuclear war is very important, just as important as supporting the TPNW, and probably more so. I personally think that the likelihood of war before 2050 is quite great, and that includes a nuclear war. Other people wouldn't assess the likelihood as that great, but I do. So what is no first use? No first use is the idea that a nation with nuclear weapons makes a declaration that they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. At the moment, only China and India have such a declared policy. The US was moving toward that to some extent under Obama and Joe Biden. But then they got a lot of pushback from their allies around the world, including Australia, in Asia, South Korea and Japan, and of course NATO countries also pushed back against it because they believe that somehow that will decrease their security, when in fact the reality is the reverse. So this campaign for no first use policies is a global campaign. And I'll just show you the website if I can. Let me just go to share. Okay, this is it. That's the home page of the website. And of course, you can get a lot more information by going to all these buttons up the top. So you can learn all about no first use policies from this website, which is nofirstuse.global. I'll put that in the chat afterwards as well. So, right, stop share. Um, now, what we're aiming for Australia is uh, to announce that it supports the idea of nations declaring their own no first use policies for their nuclear weapons. That would have an incredible impact around the world, especially on other supposed nations that are supposedly under America's nuclear umbrella, such as the other nations. And it would really help to move the TPNW forward. And this is something which is going to be much easier for the Australian government to do. It's much more immediately achievable. All it involves is the public political declaration. It doesn't involve doing anything else. So it's very easy. And you would think that a government that had pretensions to mitigating the threat of nuclear war and achieving nuclear disarmament would jump at the opportunity to say that they support the idea of no first use policies. In fact, they haven't jumped at it. The Labor Party used to have those pretensions back in the days of Gareth Evans. And Gareth Evans is out there. He's one of the main champions of no first use policies. He's been supporting it for years and years, and he still is. Why are Albanese and Penny Wong so silent? It's because this Labor Party is the most unambitious and timid Labor Party we've ever had, I think, in the area of foreign policy and in preventing nuclear war. We used to be a country which was said to be somewhat of a leader in de-risking nuclear war, in putting in place preventative measures against nuclear war. No longer. Instead, we've got a Labor Party that is helping to take us and the world towards nuclear war. I think it might have an effect on the government, though, for IPAN to start supporting no first use policies, because they're not going to make any moves to join the TPNW. So they might be looking for some announcements they can make, some steps they can take towards preventing nuclear war. And for Australia to declare its support for no first use policies would be so easy and such an obvious thing to do. As Gareth Evans consistently says, this is the first thing an Australian government should do. So I'll try and show you now some other documents. This is a this is a letter by Gareth Evans. Let me just try and maximize this. I hope you can all see this. I'm trying to get to where I can maximize it, and I can't seem to get up to that because I've got this bar up on top. All right, I'll have to just leave it as it is. That was a letter from Gareth Evans, which has now disappeared off my screen. Never mind. This is another letter from Gareth Evans, an article about no first use, and he comes to this conclusion. The most immediately useful step we could take would be to support the growing international movement for the universal adoption of no first use by nuclear armed states. And he lives in the hope that the Labor government will do that. So what we're asking the Australian government to do is not to declare a no first use policy itself, obviously, because we don't have nuclear weapons, but to say that they support nuclear nations adopting such a policy. That would have an effect on nations around the world. They wouldn't even have to specifically lobby the US because that announcement in itself would send the message to the US that we want them to do that. No first use can work in tandem with the TPNW. And I think that IPAN, whenever we say that we want Australia to sign and ratify the TPNW, we should as well say that we think that failing that, Australia should declare its support for no first use policies. Because we've got to provide Australia with an alternative. They are not going to move towards the TPNW because it involves interfering with Pine Gap and Northwest Cape. That's not realistic to expect them to do that. They won't do it. And they have 3 escape clauses in their Labor Party platform where they can postpone joining the TPNW for as long as they like. And that's exactly what they'll do.
Thanks, Colin. Could you stop sharing now?
Yes.
And we, in a little while, if you're nearing the end of your talk, we will open up for discussion and questions that people might have.
Sure. I'll just show you a leaflet which has a lot of information on it. And now I've just got to be able to scroll down on that leaflet. Oh dear. I'll just see if I can minimize that. I hope you're seeing this.
We are. We can see it down to circumstances. So perhaps that's something as well you could put in the chat, Colin.
Wait a minute. Yeah, this is okay. Well, it's disappearing off my screen for some reason.
Okay,
Can you see it? You can see the top of the leaflet.
Yep. But I think it'd be a good idea to stop sharing now, just so we can move on to questions and questions and discussion, Colin. Yeah.
I'll just stop sharing.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Have I stopped sharing?
No.
It's still up, Colin. You need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Oh, I can do it up the top. Okay. All right.
Still there.
No,
Still there?
that's right now.
That's it.
It's
All
gone
good
now.
Oh,
now.
it's gone,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yep.
It has
Yep.
gone.
That's good.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Colin. That's an important area that we need to be looking at. So I'm going to open up now with questions and comments. Ross first.
Yeah, Colin, you mentioned that there's a growing international support for this idea, and I think Gareth Evans in his letter there said there's a international campaign about it. I'm just wondering whether there is through the United Nations maybe, or the International Peace Bureau or something, is there a statement or a thing that we can ask the Australian government to sign on to about no first use?
I'm not aware of an actual statement that's been put out there for governments to sign on to. No, but you're right. It is a worldwide campaign. And if you go to that website, you'll certainly get a lot of information that I can't give you tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to put the link in the chat, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah. And anything else? Yeah, Francis?
I was wondering, you said, well, obviously it's a global campaign, and probably I'll find this in the website too. But do you know of any kind of partnerships that Australia has linked up with, say, Great Britain, a group in Great Britain that are trying to campaign on the same thing, or any other country, United States or China even? I don't know. Any other groups involved that you know
Well, the International Peace Bureau, which is European. There's Global Zero. There's various international activist campaigns. I'm not sure whether Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament in England is involved with it. I don't specifically know a group in England.
Righty.
But there are people in all countries, and there's a big campaign in America. And in America, the politicians there have introduced resolutions, House Resolutions 77. Elizabeth Warren, the senators in the US have introduced resolutions into the House and the Senate regarding no first use.
Okay, might be something we should be talking to David Shoebridge and any other politician that we can talk to about this. Bob Mackison was next.
Hi, Colin. You mentioned that China and India are the only currently declared no first use nations. I was just wondering if you had any opinion on whether, assuming that the Modi government continues in power in India, how stable is their commitment, given the nature of that government?
Well, I really don't know. The trouble is Pakistan doesn't have a similar no first use policy. They are afraid that India is going to unilaterally invade them, so they're keeping their first use option open. And anyway, we're hoping, it's hoped that Pakistan and Russia would come on board if America declared a no first use policy. I think India will try and maintain it because both China and India share a border and they both have the no first use policy. China and Russia also have kind of an agreement for no first use against each other. But something really exciting, which is just happening now, is that China, over the last few years, I'm no apologist for China, but over the last few years, they have consistently in a number of forums opposed to the US and to all of the nations that they join a no first use policy. And they have put forward a working paper for the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference for next year, 2026, proposing a 5-way treaty for no first use between the nuclear armed nations, America, France, Britain, China, Russia. So that's going to be very important that will come up. And I think Australia should be vocally saying that we agree with that. It is going to make a real difference to making the world a safer place and to raising the bar for conventional nuclear. Strengthen the nuclear taboo. Words matter, and it is a guardrail. It's no guarantee, but it is a guardrail. It is a guardrail which can help stop nuclear war breaking out in a China-US conflict.
Yeah,
So,
that's a
we've got to
really
put
good
this
point.
in place.
Yeah, thanks so much, Colin. Derek, and we're going to move on fairly soon after that, unless there's other questions or comments to the rest of the meeting. But Derek?
Yeah. Colin, what would be your response to the no first use of nuclear weapons implies that the Australian government would have to eject the B-52 bombers from the Northern Territory because more than likely they'd be carrying nuclear weapons, and also to close down Pine Gap because it has a targeting role?
Well, Australia would simply be saying that it supports nuclear armed nations adopting no first use policies. We wouldn't be adopting a no first use policy ourselves. So we wouldn't have to close down Pine Gap. We wouldn't have to do anything except make this political announcement. This is the attraction of Australia saying that it supports nuclear armed nations declaring no first use policies. America, of course, would have. I mean, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, Derek, but and that would be the case if we joined the TPNW. We'd have to do those things. So that would be a real problem for the TPNW.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, I'm listening to a work meeting.
Ross.
Sorry?
Ross, would you like to ask a question? You muted, Ross.
Yeah, sorry. Just a very quick thing. We have a seat on the International Peace Bureau board through Annette, as the chair of IPAN. I think this is something we should be raising with the International Peace Bureau, that they take a lead in this regard, taking into account what Colin's saying, but also putting together something that is an international campaign that those nuclear governments can sign on to. I think that'd be a useful thing for us to do in the International Peace Bureau.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that they are already involved with it, and that they are one of them for the international campaign. But yes, we should get links with them. And I really think that IPAN here in Australia should start talking about no first use as well as the TPNW. It's important to pursue both, but really no first use is much more feasibly achievable in the immediate term.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Colin. That's been really good to look more closely at this no first use policy. And yeah, so it's certainly something that we need to have on the agenda for our next CC meeting.